Tokyo Bay, January 11th, 1942, 04:17 a.m. The harbor is black glass. A cold wind moves across the water, barely disturbing the reflections of warships anchored in perfect formation. Battleships, heavy cruisers, destroyers lined like steel sentinels beneath the rising flag of the Empire. Inside the Naval General Staff building, lights are still burning. Vice Admiral Shigeyoshi Inoue stands over a map of the Pacific. The red flags marking Japanese conquests seem endless now. Malaya, the Philippines, Hong Kong, Wake Island. Oil from the Dutch East Indies will soon flow. The southern resource area has fallen faster than anyone predicted. The empire is expanding, and quickly. An officer quietly mentions American submarines operating near Formosa. Inoue barely looks up. Annoyances, he mutters. Annoyances. The Imperial Japanese Navy had prepared for a decisive surface war. Battleships were its pride. Carrier aviation was its spear. Submarines? They were meant to scout ahead of the fleet or finish off damaged enemy warships after the big guns had spoken. Commerce raiding was beneath them. That was a Western strategy, British, American, weak. Japan believed wars were won by decisive battle, one crushing engagement that shattered the enemy's will. The U.S. Pacific Fleet had already been bloodied at Pearl Harbor. America would negotiate before its submarines ever mattered. Or so they thought. Beneath the South China Sea, 200 feet below the surface, a different story was already unfolding. The USS Seawolf moves silently through green darkness. The boat smells of diesel and sweat. Men whisper over hydrophones, listening for propeller beats. Multiple screws, bearing 075. Lieutenant Commander Frederick Warder lowers his binoculars and studies the periscope well. Through that thin column of seawater lies Japan's future. Tankers moving crude oil from Borneo toward the home islands. Oil is life. Oil is ships. Oil is aircraft. Oil is war. Warder knows it. Tokyo does not. Torpedo 1. Fire. The submarine shudders. Seconds stretch. Then a muffled underwater detonation rolls through the hull like distant thunder. On the surface, a Japanese tanker begins to burn. It is January 1942, and this is only the beginning. At first, the numbers seem trivial. A freighter here, a small transport there. The Japanese merchant marine is vast, nearly 6 million tons strong at the start of the war. The Navy sees no reason to panic. After all, they are sinking Allied ships too. The Pacific is chaotic. Losses are expected. But beneath the optimism hides a dangerous assumption. America will not fight this war with patience. They believe the United States lacks the stomach for attrition. They are wrong. By mid-1942, American submarines are spreading across the Pacific like silent hunters, from Pearl Harbor to Fremantle.
South China Sea, October 11, 1944, 02:32 a.m. The ocean is calm, too calm. Through the periscope of USS Tang, the horizon glows faintly under a sliver of moon. Dark silhouettes move against the starlight. A convoy, tankers, freighters, at least 3 escorts. Commander Richard O'Kane doesn't blink. Range, he whispers. 3,000 yards and closing. He rotates the periscope slowly. The tanker's hull fills the lens. Fat, heavy, slow. A floating reservoir of fuel that Japan desperately needs. O'Kane exhales. Fire 1, fire 2. Compressed air hisses. Torpedoes streak into the black.
Seconds pass. The crew listens, counting in silence. Then the sea erupts. A blossom of orange flame punches into the sky as oil ignites. The tanker shudders, cracks open, and begins to list. Another explosion follows, and another. Men shout in Japanese across the water. Whistles blow. Machine guns fire blindly into the darkness. But the submarine is already slipping deeper. Tang vanishes. Above her, thousands of tons of fuel burn into nothing. By 1944, this is no longer isolated harassment. It is systematic strangulation. American submarines now prowl choke points, the Luzon Strait, the Formosa Channel, the South China Sea. They hunt tankers like predators who have memorized migration routes. The Imperial Japanese Navy has begun to understand the scale of the disaster. Too late. Back in Tokyo, reports arrive faster than they can be processed. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome reads casualty summaries with tightening jaw. Oil imports from the Dutch East Indies have dropped by nearly half. Tanker losses are catastrophic. Worse, shipyards cannot keep pace. America is launching submarines at a staggering rate. The Balao and Gato classes slide into the water from Groton, Portsmouth, Mare Island. Steel, engines, torpedoes, an industrial rhythm Japan cannot match. Each new American submarine represents another blade in the dark. Meanwhile, Japanese escorts are stretched thin across an empire that spans thousands of miles. Convoys grow larger, slower, more visible. Perfect targets. The numbers tell a brutal story. In 1943, American submarines sank over 1.5 million tons of Japanese shipping. In 1944, that number explodes past 3 million tons. Tankers are hit hardest. Without oil, the combined fleet begins to ration operations severely. Carrier groups that once trained constantly now conserve fuel. Battleships remain anchored at truck or kure like museum pieces. Pilots practice less. Engines sit cold. Warships become symbols instead of weapons. And then comes the Philippines. October 1944. The Battle of Leyte Gulf approaches, the largest naval engagement in history. Admiral Soemu Toyoda prepares the last great gamble of the Imperial Navy. He will commit nearly everything remaining: carriers, battleships, cruisers. But many of those ships must steam from distant ports. They need fuel, fuel that no longer exists in sufficient quantity. Japanese tankers attempt desperate runs from Borneo to the home islands. They hug coastlines, sail at night, scatter into smaller groups. USS Tang intercepts them. So does USS Barb, USS...
Section 3. The Last Fuel. Tokuyama Fuel Depot, Japan, April 5, 1945, 09:40 a.m. Gray smoke hangs low over the harbor. Oil storage tanks stand half-empty, cavernous steel shells echoing with absence. Workers move slowly along the docks, hoses snaking across concrete like lifelines feeding something that no longer has strength to fight. At anchor in the inland sea rests the battleship Yamato. She is immense, 72,000 tons of steel and pride. 9 18.1-inch guns capable of firing shells weighing more than a small car. She was built to decide wars. Now she waits for fuel she will never fully receive. Inside Yamato's steel hull, Captain Kosaku Ariga stands quietly beside a chart table. The order has come from Admiral Soemu Toyoda. Operation 10 Go. Yamato will sail south toward Okinawa, attack the American invasion fleet, beach herself if necessary, and fight as a stationary battery until destroyed. There will be no return voyage. There isn't enough fuel for one. The irony is unbearable. The largest battleship ever constructed, symbol of imperial might, now depends on scraping together the final reserves of a starving nation. Tankers that once brought crude from Borneo lie at the bottom of the South China Sea. American submarines made sure of that. What remains in storage is rationed carefully. Yamato receives just enough to reach Okinawa, just enough to die. Sailors move along the deck in silence. Some write final letters, others clean weapons that will never cool from sustained fire. You can almost feel the weight pressing down on them, not just steel, but inevitability. In Tokyo, officials speak of honor, but everyone in uniform understands the truth. This mission exists because the empire can no longer maneuver freely. It can no longer sustain prolonged operations. It can only make gestures. The American submarine campaign has reduced Japan's oil imports by nearly 90% since 1941. 90%. Imagine an entire navy operating on a tenth of its original bloodstream. Training flights have been cut to the bone. Many kamikaze pilots now receive barely enough fuel for one-way missions. Destroyers assigned to escort convoys sit docked, unable to patrol. The once fearsome combined fleet is a collection of magnificent machines without motion. And now Yamato prepares to sail. April 6, 1520. Lines are cast off. Yamato moves slowly through the inland sea, escorted by a handful of destroyers. The engines vibrate beneath her decks, consuming precious fuel with every mile. American reconnaissance aircraft quickly spot her. Reports race to Admiral Raymond A. Spruance and Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher, commanding Task Force 58. Carrier aircraft launch in waves, hundreds of them. They require fuel too, but America has more than enough. April 7th, just after noon. The sky darkens with incoming planes, Helldivers, Avengers.
Section 4. The Sound of Empty Seas. East China Sea, July 28, 1945, 23:11. The ocean is unnaturally still. Aboard the American submarine USS Barb, Commander Eugene B. Fluckey stands in the conning tower, staring through the periscope at a coastline barely visible in the haze. Nothing moves. No convoy lights. No escort silhouettes. No tanker wakes cutting through moonlit water. Just silence. Months earlier, these waters had been crowded with merchant ships hauling oil from Southeast Asia to the home islands. Now they are empty. Not because Japan has secured them, because there is nothing left to send. By the summer of 1945, American submarines are no longer hunting convoys. They are hunting scraps. The once vast Japanese merchant fleet has been shattered. What remains hugs coastal routes, creeping between ports under cover of darkness. Even then, many ships carry more rice than oil, the empire now desperate to feed itself rather than fuel its navy. The strangulation is complete, and it happened mostly out of sight. In Tokyo, ration lines stretch through neighborhoods already scarred by incendiary bombing. Civilians clutch small bags of rice if they are lucky enough to receive any at all. The shortage of oil has rippled outward. Without fuel, fishing fleets remain docked. Without fuel, railways move less freight. Without fuel, factories producing aircraft engines and ammunition slow to a crawl. The military had gambled everything on decisive battle. Instead, it faces decisive depletion. The Imperial Japanese Navy still exists on paper. There are ships anchored at Kure. There are aircraft frames in hangars. There are torpedoes stacked in depots. But readiness is an illusion. Carrier pilots cannot train properly without aviation gasoline. Destroyers cannot escort without diesel. Battleships cannot sortie without heavy fuel oil.
every operational decision now revolves around scarcity. The once proud combined fleet has become a static defense force, waiting for invasion, waiting for impact. American intelligence officers begin to grasp the scale of what has been achieved. Submarines, comprising less than 2% of U.S. naval personnel, have sunk more than half of Japan's merchant fleet. Over 5 million tons of shipping lie beneath the Pacific. Oil tankers represent the most devastating losses. This was never about glory. It was about arithmetic. You can almost hear the ticking of that arithmetic, a countdown measured not in days, but in barrels. On July 30, 1945, the cruiser USS Indianapolis is torpedoed by the Japanese submarine I-58. It is one of the final submarine attacks of the war. The irony cuts deep. Japan still possesses submarines capable of striking, but it no longer possesses the logistical lifelines to sustain a prolonged campaign. Even its successes come too late.